Hello there, and a big warm welcome to this joint webinar brought to you by BlueVenn and London Research. So my name is Jen and I'm on the marketing team here at BlueVenn, and I'm going to be covering some housekeeping bits before passing you over to our presenters. So in this interactive session, we'll be revealing some of the results from a new Customer Data Excellence Survey that was recently undertaken by London Research and BlueVenn. We'll also be delving into our brand new 7-stage customer data maturity model. So we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So we'll be launching live polls throughout the presentation. If you want to give your feedback, that would be great. And all you need to do is click on your chosen answer on the screen. Make sure you send any questions that you may have over to us throughout the session, and we'll get to these at the end of the presentation. Any questions that we don't manage to cover will be answered offline shortly after the presentation has ended. So all registrants will receive a recording of the session via email within 48 hours, along with the full Customer Data Excellence report with all the results from our recent survey. Okay, so let's introduce the presenters. So first up, we've got Linus Gregoriadis, who's the director at London Research. Linus, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jen.
That's all right. And we've also got Andrew Campbell, who is the Martech director at Home Agency. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, afternoon, everyone.
And then we've got here with me today Anthony Bottibol, who's our marketing director at BlueVenn, who's here with me in our Bristol office.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Jen.
So just want to say a big thank you everyone for joining the presentation today. Anthony, I'm going to pass the screen over to you so you can talk about the growth of the CDP market if you're ready.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you, Jen. So I guess I wanted to start by saying really that, BlueVenn has really been riding the coattails of the customer data platform market since its inception in 2013. I say riding the coattails because it's really been a phenomenal worldwide interest in the CDP market over the last 5 or 6 years. However, in reality, some of the CDP platforms, or the original gangsters, as we were referred to recently in an article I saw, have actually been around for considerably longer. Now, companies have been unifying data or attempting to unify all their customer data in many ways for many years, usually through bespoke, complex and expensive IT projects. Customer data platforms, or CDPs, just to add a new acronym to the world, however, have pushed data unification, or as we say it at BlueVenn, the single customer view, into the mainstream of marketing tech. So much so that a statistic which I saw last year and which is on screen predicts at a compound annual growth rate of nearly 30%, that investments in CDPs are on course to reach 3.3 billion by 2023. I think also the last round of market stats from the CDP Institute estimated the market to surpass 1 billion this year. Both, I think, show that an investment in a CDP is high on the agenda for marketeers. However, with huge success comes huge confusion too. At the last check, there were about 100 vendors claiming to provide a CDP product or a CDP as part of their solution. And a lot of the issues that marketeers are facing is that the hype is actually very hard to cut through. Common questions we see are things like, whether a homegrown solution such as a data lake or warehouse can actually replicate the CDP functionality, or if a CDP also provides cleansing, deduplication and transformation of the data, or even down to the very basics of how a CDP differs from a CRM tool or a data management platform, etc. And that challenge is just as prevalent for us as a CDP vendor as it is for the buyer. I know from calls with the CDP Institute and other CDP vendors in that institute that it's a common frustration. A common frustration on both sides of the fence. And a quick internet search for how a CDP differs from a DMP or a CRM or an MDM solution will provide you a lot of results. Because of this, the CDP Institute has last month announced its own Real CDP certification. And in a nutshell, it summarizes to the following. A CDP needs to ingest data from any source, and ultimately the CDP needs to be able to take data from all the systems that hold data about your customers, from real-time API to modern CRM or e-commerce platforms to maybe hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly uploads from other more challenging systems or spreadsheets even. The second capability that it suggests a real CDP needs to have is to capture full detail of all the ingested data. Now, this is sometimes essential and sometimes not, but it does need to be able to bring customized fields and data points into it that sometimes is challenging in other applications. Number 3, it needs to store the ingested data indefinitely. Now, again, this is an important prerequisite of any CDP, that it does not index or archive old data natively. Every change should be timestamped to provide a full audit trail. Remember, everything about an individual on your database can change. Their name can change, their address can change, their email, their phone number, their marital status, even their gender. These can all change, and it's important that each of those changes is recorded and maintained, because it's very important for analysis and insights and trends. We even actually have an insurance firm that has customers that fill out incorrect date of birth details to check to see how premiums differ. The fourth, which is probably the secret sauce of a CDP, is to create unified profiles of identified individuals. And this is where what we call internally here is the single customer view. As I say, it's the magic of a CDP to achieve one record for every customer and ultimately a memory of every click, purchase, visit, like, or interaction with your brand that the business can then use for marketing purposes. And the final prerequisite of being a real CDP is to share data with any system that needs it. So this is another key criteria for a real CDP, and one that has probably the most profound value for marketeers that are looking to almost retrofit a customer-centric data base into their existing tech stack. It needs to take data from infinite sources, unify, cleanse the data, and then push it to a preferred marketing channel or marketing channels. So these are the high-level requirements for a real CDP. And again, a quick internet search for real CDP will provide you with a fuller explanation. So apologies for anyone that may have heard a lot of that before, but I did feel it would be a good introduction to the research. And without holding up all the interesting content, I'm actually going to hand it over to Linus. So over to you, Linus.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. Well, great to be involved with this research with BlueVenn, have my fellow research author Andrew Campbell on board, who we'll be hearing from a bit later, who has created our CDP maturity model. But essentially, the objective of this research was to explore really how companies are using CDPs to provide better customer experiences and improve business performance. This, as Anthony has discussed, with the market sizing and a lot of the buzz around CDPs, is an exciting market. So I guess what we wanted to do was really understand how the extent to which companies are on board with CDPs, i.e. had them, and what CDPs is helping them to achieve. And I think most importantly with this research project, and Jen's mentioned that shortly the report will be available, was to make sure it was something really practical and tangible to help companies further their own data maturity. And I think the maturity model can really help organizations assess where they are and what they need to do. So on the methodology for the research, Jen, would you mind nudging me on to the next slide, please?
Yeah, of course.
Great, thanks. So we carried out a global survey of almost 200 companies. Most of the responding organizations were in the US, and I think that reflects the maturity of the market there to a degree, but it was a global survey, and we focused organizations at the larger end of the spectrum. So to qualify to do the survey, they needed annual revenues of at least 50 million. I should also note at this point that what we did was we included B2B and B2C companies in the research. Historically, yeah, I think as we'll see that there's the potential for both B2B and B2C companies to really benefit from this kind of data-driven marketing, and it was probably originally B2B organizations which were really the first to really adopt sort of data-driven marketing and take that to new levels, with B2C companies now following suit. The first area we looked at was in the report, following on from the survey, was around the uptake of CDPs, and just over half now we found now have customer data platforms, and a further 35% are planning to invest in one. And this clearly shows that there is really good traction for this software. And as we'd again, as we'd expect, the US was further ahead in terms of adoption. And when we look at the adoption of CDPs by annual revenues, we can see that the largest organizations, so those with revenues of $500 million upwards, were more likely than the slightly smaller organizations to have CDPs.
But the interesting thing there, Linus, is that the smaller businesses are catching up. You know, there is a big shift, and I think that's a big part of the growth in the marketplace.
No, that's a really good point. And it's all in the report. We reference some Gartner research which found that they found similar levels of adoption of CDPs, but it's worth noting that some may say they're using CDPs, and there's, although we tried to be clear in the research, there may be some confusion, and some of those companies may not actually be using CDPs as defined by the real CDP initiative. Some, for example, will think their CRMs are CDPs when they don't fulfill all those functions mentioned by Anthony earlier. Okay, it's now time for a poll question. So if we could put that on, Jen. We wanted to understand in the survey what the top marketing priority was for respondents. We want to give you as webinar attendees. Similarly, we wanted to ask you this question and then compare. So the question is, what is your organization's top marketing priority? And you can select one of online visibility and lead generation, so i.e. real kind of top of funnel type stuff, engagement, lead nurturing, conversion, purchase, and then retention and repeat purchase as we move through the purchase journey and customer life cycle. We'll just give you a few seconds there to answer, and then shortly Jen can show the results, and then we can compare that to the survey findings.
Yeah, I can see the polls coming in now. I'll just wait for movement to stop, and then I will close the poll.
And those stages of the purchase journey, Linus, those broad areas of activity, when you look at different types and flavors of CDP, often they're described by these areas of the purchase journey. Some are very acquisition heavy, some have come out of the CRM world, some are very much e-commerce, CRO, decisioning platforms. So the language we were trying to use in the research, we're trying to make it very, very business friendly and business focused in relation to what people are doing with the CDP.
Great, thanks.
I'm going to close the poll now, and then we can review the results.
Okay.
Almost perfectly. That's a perfect cue for you, Linus.
Yes, yeah. So we can see there that companies just marginally most likely to be focused on that top of the funnel area, so online visibility, lead generation, so acquisition type stuff. Then in second place there we have conversion purchase, so sort of conversion rate optimization, e-commerce optimization, that type of stuff. And then jointly in third, engagement, lead nurturing, and also retention, the repeat purchase, the loyalty type stuff. And not dissimilar to the, if we can move to the next slide, please, Jen.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to close the poll now.
Yeah, if we look at the survey results here, we can see similarly the acquisitions of visibility, lead gen coming out on top, and just narrowly ahead of conversion purchase, so very similar. What was interesting about the research, and in this slide we've broken this down by organizations using a CDP and organizations not using a CDP, we can see that those using a CDP are around twice as likely to be primarily focused on engagement and lead nurture. So this gives a clue as to where the real power of CDPs lies. And this is nicely...
If you just go back to that one, Linus, I think what's interesting there is if you think of online visibility and lead gen as very much ad tech land, it's third-party data, it's acquisition-led. And at the other end of the spectrum, retention was all about owned first-party data. It was CRM, it was loyalty, it was repeat purchase. Those worlds matured separately, and what we're seeing is that ad tech now is meeting MarTech, and we are seeing, and the space where it meets is there. When you've generated a lead, but we're taking it through a purchase journey, we're influencing its behavior, we're trying to lead score it, we're trying to draw it through a purchase with very timely, personalized interactions. So I think we hear these terms of ad tech and MarTech. They don't exist in isolation anymore, and I think what this is showing is that the CDP is allowing you to have a very seamless journey, right from initial inquiry and engagement with a brand right through to purchase. So I think there's definitely, the technology is enabling the marketers to what used to be quite a separate, an acquisition team over there and a retention team over there. That doesn't cut it anymore, and I think that's what I took out of this research in that space.
That's right, and that's what we see here as well. I mean, it's utilizing first-party data to optimize what you're doing around ad tech and optimize the advertising. Maybe suppressing customers that that have purchased. I mean, we all get that, don't we? Where you're being remarketed to across the web for something that you've already purchased. So that in isolation as something that utilizing first-party data in the ad tech world can benefit you.
Yeah, great points, and we've brought in. You can see here. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Jenny. Yeah, we can see here a nice quote from David Rabb, who provided some nice input on the research for us in terms of his view on the findings. And he makes this point that the fundamental nature of the CDP is to unify information about known customers and how they're less relevant before customers are known. So that's the kind of the DMP acquisition world. And also, I guess, when other MarTech, parts of the MarTech and CRM stacks come into play, when we get to the customer loyalty stage of proceedings.
Yeah, that's when the systems of record and the CRM systems really kick in.
Yeah, and another key finding from the research was really this clear link between CDP deployment and business success. So CDP owners are 2.5 times more likely to have significantly outperformed against their organization's main marketing goal in 2018. And David Rabb again has got some nice things to say about that. He notes the correlation between business success and CDP users, and how having a CDP is both evidence of maturity and an important tool for taking advantage of that maturity. So having a CDP doesn't automatically guarantee success, but it's certainly those companies who are mature enough to have CDPs and then to take advantage of their benefits certainly helps organizations achieve their marketing and business goals. Okay, so we've talked earlier about the 7-stage CDP maturity model. It's now over to Andrew, who can talk through why exactly we wanted to produce this and what those different stages are. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Linus. Okay, so before we walk you through the maturity model, just give you a sense of why we thought it was useful to develop as part of the research. And what I was trying to achieve with this was to come up with a tool that helped marketers define and prioritize what they wanted to do with this whiz-bang technology. So what were their CRM requirements? And I saw that as a way of saying, where do we want to get to? What's the North Star and the vision of the kind of experiences and programs we want to be running to surprise and delight our consumers? On the back of those requirements, we can then translate those into what data do we need, what decisioning do we need, what campaigns do we need in order to deliver those experiences. So moving from CX requirements into data requirements, that gives us a good target to say, this is what we need our CDP to be doing, this is the data it needs to hold. And then we can start to procure the right CDP, we can start to design the right data architecture, we can start to go about developing our technical solution. The other thing it was hoping to act as was an audit tool, so a reference point for you to identify where are you now in terms of your capability. We could then compare that where are you now position to where you want to get to based on the CX requirements definition. That hopefully identifies the gap, and any plan is the essence of the plan is how do I get from where I am now to where I want to be. So that auditing process would help us define a data and technology roadmap aligned to business goals. That a part of that was then taking that into how do we apply this very integrated approach to leveraging our data in order to deliver these great experiences, and to be brutally honest about it, monetize it. So how do we deliver great things for the consumer, but how do we monetize that data set? How do we reduce cost to serve, or increase cross-sell, upsell rates, or increase margin? You go from thinking about what data do we want in order to and take it into what do we want to do with it, and I think that's critical. And it also forces us and helps us think about how do we unlock synergies across those different marketing programs, from acquisition through lead nurturing, through conversion, through retention. It helps us adopt a very joined up approach to our thinking. So the maturity modeling is a strategic planning tool. It's not an answer. It's not a checklist. It's a framework that hopefully helps marketers lead the marketing technology strategy debate. And it's a tricky job, that. It's a fine balancing act, reconciling consumer expectations and experiences that we want to deliver to them with the need for commercial payback, with the need for technical and operational considerations to be addressed. But that's the job now for marketers in this space. You know, marketing technology isn't just about what we want to do or how we do it or how much it costs. It's all those three things. So hopefully when you've been through the research and looked at the model, you can see how we can help you with those challenges. So if you click me on, Jen. So we'll walk you through the summary of the maturity model itself. 7 stages. Each stage we've identified what capability is present at that stage of maturity, which is what it does at that stage. Then we identify the functionality that underpins that capability, which is how does it do, how does it deliver that capability, And then finally, what business benefits, which is why would we want that capability as a marketer. So each stage is defined in terms of those three aspects. And before we go and walk through each of the stages, just stand back from that and give you a sense of what was the thinking behind this maturity model. And there were four main factors driving the design and the thinking that shaped this outcome, that shaped this maturity model. One was I wanted something that was very much focused on business drivers. It talked to business users in their language, and it focused on business outcomes. It wasn't a technology play, this. Its audience is senior strategic marketers. So it's all hopefully grounded on business drivers around consumer experience delivery and delivering against business goals. Secondly, we were trying to slice up a very big elephant. As Anthony has talked about, there's many different flavors of CDPs and many different definitions. We wanted just to break it down into some very clean components, so that we've got some clarity and some structure. Thirdly, and this is a hobby horse of mine, I wanted to promote a phased approach to the design and development of a CDP. It's linked to that, decomposing it into its component parts. And that comes from an experience I had. If I go back to when I started in technology, the late 80s and 90s, I was involved in that first generation of CRM technology investments, where marketers were given a checkbook, spent a lot of money on technology, and if we're brutally honest, overpromised and underdelivered. I think now we've hopefully learned from that experience, and we're much more pragmatic, we're much more commercial in outlining what we want the tech to do, and outlining a means of funding that investment over time with a nice phased, low risk, incremental approach, embracing all the disciplines and principles of Agile. I think that's very important, that we don't just try and go for this big blob of technology that will solve all our problems. And the fourth driver for it and principle behind it was making the point that there's no one size fits all approach. There's no dot to dot guide for you. This is a framework, but you have to apply it to your circumstances and your brand's needs and your positioning in the marketplace and your CRM programs. But you have to do that thinking to work out the optimal marketing technology strategy for your business and the CDP, which is a core component of that strategy. So focus on business drivers, bite-sized chunks, phased approach, and don't try and expect a one-size-fits-all. Those were the drivers and the thinking behind the model. So hopefully that gives you some of the context. If we walk through now each of the stages, so first base is creating this unified customer profile. It's what Anthony was talking about this establishing this platform of a persistent, unified customer profile that's accessible to other systems. It's the ingest and capture and store data, create the profile and share the data. So that real CDP definition, that is what the job is at this stage. And without that, to be perfectly honest, you're not in the game. We need to create that data hub, that data set that gives us control and access to our first party data. And that's the family silver for a brand. That's the one thing that you've got that your competitors haven't. So if we can create this data set, what it gives us is it supports compliance, which is very important, and it maintains privacy and permissions and the quality of data. But for me, that's a hygiene factor. The thing that it really enables is delivering game-changing customer experiences and CRM programs. It enables you as a marketer to deliver these highly personalized, timely, relevant communications that a customer will value. So using Google language, be there, be quick and be useful. Turn up in the consumer's life when they want you with what they need, and hopefully they will love you and buy it from you as a result. So that's stage one. Stage two is where we're looking to analyze and mine that data set in order to get insights. And we deliberately talk about actionable customer insights. So this is the stage of the development where you've got the data, but you're also mining that data to understand more about your customer. and that could be via dashboards or in reporting systems and query and discovery tools, or it could be predictive models, it could be bespoke analysis, but you are mining the data to understand your customer. Who are your best customers? What segment dimensions describe them? What new segment dimensions can you bring into play now, because you've got this rich data set? And Anthony talked about, you know, what videos they've viewed and posts they've liked and PDFs they've downloaded. What does that tell you about their sentiment and their advocacy towards you as a brand? What does it tell you about how they shop? Are they a satisficer or an optimizer when it comes to purchasing fashion goods, for example? You should know and understand them better as a result. You should understand how they behave within the purchase journey. You should understand, where are they within that purchase journey? Where are they in geographically? Where are they in terms of the device they're using? What's the context of their purchase? All those things should be served up as a result of having access to this gold mine of data. That hopefully means we can identify these key moments of need and hopefully act on them. So what we want to do with those insights is then use them and activate the data to deliver a better experience. So if we click on the first level of sophistication I'd expect to see on the back of that data and those insights is sweating your outbound owned media. The most obvious one of these being your email channel. It's the easiest one to personalize and optimize, and it's the most mature. But it could be your direct mail program, it could be your outbound calling program, it could be your field sales teams or events. It's anything where you can trigger and personalize an outbound communication to your customers. I would expect that data set and the insights to be surfaced in the outbound owned channels first. It's the easiest to do, and it's a proven technique to drive engagement and response. Then we move on to optimizing our digital media, our off-site activity. So this is your paid media activity within your digital media channels. So it's your paid pay-per-click, your display ads, any of your paid social media activity. So this is our off-site third-party activity. So we should be surfacing our first-party data, defining tighter audiences based on these enhanced segment models, based on these enhanced predictive scoring models. We should be using our data, first-party data, to do smarter off-site paid media activity. Now, that's a higher order challenge because you've got real-time decisioning in the mix there. Content is being delivered off-site, so you need to plan and understand the context in which it's being consumed and how you're going to how it's going to be used by your consumers. And obviously, there's an integration with an external tech stack. So it's a higher order undertaking than our outbound activity. Once we've done that, I would be moving on. If we look at stage 5 of the model, this is where we're looking to sweat our owned media assets in terms of our digital platforms, principally our e-commerce store and our website. So what we're looking to see here is very integrated and seamless approach to e-commerce and content marketing. And that was something that came through very strongly in the research. 90% of people who had a CDP had an integrated data set across web and e-commerce. So that means that when I've searched a product in my web store, that's reflected in the content I consume on the website and that's recommended to me. Similarly, when the videos that I viewed on the Content Hub could influence the search rankings or the recommending products on the web store. So we've got a very joined up approach across our owned media optimization. Again, very well proven tactic to exploit increased ROI. We've seen a lot of the experienced platforms go down that route and prove the benefits of this approach. And it's a classic conversion rate optimization technique, A/B testing, multivariate testing, and really working the data hard to deliver an enhanced consumer experience. Then level 6 is where we don't just look at our digital channels and our digital ecosystem, but we incorporate this seamless integrated delivery of experiences to our offline channels. So we've got genuinely joined up customer experiences across online and offline. And again, that's more challenging because if we're delivering content into the offline environment, we've got people to consider and we've got a more complex operational environment to consider, but we should be aiming for that. And then finally, level 7 is where we're using very sophisticated analytics at scale, using machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques to really not just have a set of campaigns that are being driven by rules set up by human beings, but that we've got personalization and segmentation being driven in real time by pattern recognition and statistical analysis of data by machines. Then we're into a different level of sophistication. So that gives us a sense of the maturity model. Hopefully you can see how it builds. Stages 1 and 7, that's all about the analytics and the insights. Stage 2 and 7 are about the analytics and the insights. Stages 3, 4, 5, and 6 are very much about activation. And that's what marketers want from a CDP. They want deeper insights that the competition hasn't got, and then they want to act on those insights and deliver a better experience as a result. Then CDP is driving better experience and value for the consumer and value for the brand. So we're going to finish this section really with a question to you, and based on that summary of the maturity model, I'd like you to think about, based on where you are now and your current channel and media capabilities, where would you place yourself in relation to those 7 stages of maturity? And we'll see how the audience is stacking up. So are you seeing yourself very much in that level 3 where you're sweating your outbound own media channels, or have you moved on in terms of sophistication where you're integrating that not only with your own media channels but with third-party offsite media activity through the demand side platforms and the ad exchanges, and you're really working your data hard to optimize the ads that are being delivered? Again, as Anthony said, you're intelligently suppressing cells, you're defining tighter audiences and segments based on first-party data, you're generating better lookalike audiences. Are you in that acquisition optimization space, or are you in the CX owned media optimization, where we're looking at a website, highly personalized web and e-commerce experience? Or are you the full 9 yards of totally integrated, seamless experiences across online and offline? And I'll hand back to you now, Jen.
Okay, we're just getting a few more responses back. Okay, and I'm now going to close the poll. And sharing the results.
And there we are. There's a hierarchy. It's and nice to see some right at the top of that food chain, but that wouldn't surprise me, and doesn't surprise me, because that's where I would start in terms of leveraging a CDP and a data capability. I'd start sweating the outbound optimization, but I would be doing that with a view to moving on. And as you can see, if the audience on the webinar is representative, that's probably not untypical. There's definitely a hierarchy there, and so that probably doesn't surprise me in terms of the kind of responses we're seeing there.
Yeah, one of the things you said, Andrew, that I really liked, and I wrote it down when you were talking about stage 1, was the one thing that you have that your competitors don't is the first-party data that you hold. I thought that was a really nice statement.
Okay, if we can click on just some concluding takeaways from the research. Was, as part of the survey, we were asking across quite a range of capabilities in the form of statements, whether survey respondents agreed or disagreed, and that the statements related to those different stages of the maturity model. And what we've done in this and the next slide is pull out some of those attributes or capabilities where those with CDPs are at least 3 times more likely to say, to firmly agree they can do these things. And we can see there we've got a full view of customers, as I think one would expect with a CDP, but also use of attribution beyond first and last click, and use of machine learning as well for real-time decisioning and data analytics. So I think the first takeaway really is this striking differential in terms of what CDP-equipped companies are able to do compared with others, and we think that at the moment this is really a sort of competitive advantage, and the companies that can do this kind of stuff are in the minority, but before long this will be there'll be an early majority and then a late majority, and you won't have such a competitive advantage if you do these things. If we can go to that next slide, please, Jen. We can see a few more attributes where this differentiation is particularly evident. Real-time personalization, testing and optimization capabilities, and the ability to set up and execute multi-channel campaigns. So these obviously align with different stages of the maturity model, but these I think with things like real-time personalization, multi-channel campaigns, very much in the more sophisticated end of
and
the
what
spectrum.
We're seeing that, Linus, is the differential is marked, but just the absolute number of people that have a CDP that are adopting these much higher order approaches to CRM programs and CX. So I think we are reaching that tipping point in terms of not just adoption of a CDP, but operationalizing and activating it. Because it's one thing to have the tech, it's another thing to actually be leveraging it fully. And I think we're seeing that now. I think that's the next wave where it'll become more the norm.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And just the final word here from David Rabb, and he's describing here how the CDP has become a foundational technology that supplements and improves all customer data activities. And he says at the end there how any company that takes its customer data seriously should probably have one. And I think on that note, we'll go back to Jen for the Q&A. Hopefully the questions have been coming in thick and fast.
Yeah, thank you very much, Linus, and thanks to everyone who has sent a question over to us. I've been jotting them down as they've been coming in. So one of the first questions I want to cover is what are the main different types of CDP? So I don't know who wants to take that, Linus, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been referenced earlier is how a lot of companies claim to have a CDP, and some genuinely do, some don't match those criteria as outlined by the CDP Institute. I think that we've seen companies are coming at this from different angles. So there are tag management companies that have now reinvented themselves as CDPs, obviously historically with a data focus. There are attribution companies now saying they can do the CDP stuff as well. I'm sure that Anthony and Andrew have probably got a take on this as well. There are companies with DMPs, data management platforms, the likes of Adobe and Oracle, who are now have made announcements about their own CDP initiatives as well.
Yeah, there are many and varied. I mean, some of the pure play data management, data vendors that have got a toolkit effectively would say we now provide a platform. Actually, they provide a set of utilities that can be used to maintain a CDP, but I would argue that isn't a CDP. Some of the analytics vendors, so some of the vendors like a SAS or SPSS, that they are analytical tools, but they do source data, manage data, but their focus historically was very much on building predictive models. So it is very much about understanding the genesis and the DNA of where your vendor is coming from, because as Linus says, a tag management heritage versus a marketing automation heritage versus an analytics heritage, very different centers of gravity. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong in any of that. It's just about alignment, and it's about fit with your requirements. So if your CX requirements are very heavily weighted towards acquisition and very heavily weighted towards paid media optimization, if you're a Netflights in the UK, which is a flight aggregator, your need is very much around paid media optimization, DMP integration, ad exchange integration, attribution, and measurement of off-site activity. So a tag management solution might be a very good fit for you. So yeah, there are many flavors of DMP, and it's just about figuring out CDP, where did it come from.
Yeah, I sit on the I'm one of the on the advisory board for the CDP Institute, and it's something that we discuss every quarter, myself and all the other CDP vendors, and we are all coming, most of us coming at it from slightly different angles in terms of the activation side of a CDP. So yeah, it's there are lots. One of the things that we're working on at the moment, there's myself and two others from the Institute are looking at the categorization of customer data platforms and starting to categorize that activation layer of each solution. So, are they tag management? Are they campaign management? Are they personalization? Or are they just a pure play CDP where the number one thing is to unify data and nothing else? So that I think that's much needed and is coming. But yeah, as you say, Andrew, it's about what are your business objectives? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, some of the customer identity and access management vendors, those units, they're very much about authentication and identity system access, that they've bulked up into CDPs, again with a very specific lens on it, but it is part of that solution. But yeah, that's great, that, Anthony. I think that kind of resource would be useful as a reference point for people.
And Anthony, I have to ask you this question that's just come through to us, which has said, who do you say are the top true CDP companies, especially with sensitive vendors?
Oh, easy, BlueVenn. Next. Yeah, obviously I'm probably not best suited to answer that, but I don't think you could go any, the first place to look is probably the CDP Institute, I would suggest. I'd say that narrows you down from 100 to maybe 40, and then from there, it is around looking, it is around writing requirements and looking at systems to match those requirements. I know, for example, that the real CDP definition doesn't define that when unifying the data, that data should be cleansed, deduplicated, enhanced. So data quality isn't necessarily a functionality of every customer data platform. However, if you need that, then there are some that do and some that don't. There are some that come at it from a very digital perspective, are probably better with digital data, but not so good with offline data. So again, it's working out, are you a truly multi-channel business or an online digital business, and therefore one might suit you better than the other. That's as impartial as I can be.
Awesome, thanks, Anthony. And the next question I want to cover is, are the stages of the CDP maturity model strictly sequential? For example, could I do advanced analytics without doing any of the cross-channel orchestration? So Andrew, do you want to take that one?
Yes, there's no doubt that in coming up with the CDP maturity model, there is a slightly arbitrary and subjective separation, but we need some kind of separation to create these different components. But without doubt, you could have very basic analytics running, driving your outbound optimization. So you might have a very basic predictive models predicting day of week and time of day when someone's most likely to open an email. That as a basic form of AI and machine learning could be a very simple predictive model that you've got running. So it's definitely the case that this is a broad sequence that generally reflects but it's not a strict sequence where you would absolutely see a separation between one stage and the other. And most businesses would probably be majoring in one area with less capabilities higher up the maturity. But I would expect a very typical situation where you've got a really sophisticated approach to outbound optimization. You've got a decent digital media optimization program running based on paid media, and you've got some basic personalization running on your website. So in truth, it's probably a red, amber, green of each stage would be a very simple way of mapping where you are, rather than a single point of where am I on the maturity. I would suggest that people look at each stage and say, well, am I very active and competent, intermediate capability or basic capability at each stage? And that's probably a more representative and realistic way of assessing your maturity, rather than a single point on a staircase.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And the last question that we're going to cover is, what types / size of organisations typically buy a CDP? Anthony?
Okay. I mean, it's an interesting question. It's quite broad and difficult to answer. I mean, so I go back to what I said at the beginning. I mean, the history of creating the unified customer database has really only been achievable by enterprise-sized organizations over time. So the CDP has, I guess, brought the complexity down, it's brought the price down, and it's made it less of a kind of black magic project and turned it into a usable piece of software that I wouldn't suggest all marketeers are capable of building the customer data platform, because you still really need to understand database structures. But certainly once it's there and up and running, it can be maintained and tweaked and changed and altered, and as a new, maybe you launch a new website, you can it's should be very quick and simple to kind of load that as a new data source into your CDP, and then it will of course do all the clever matching, merging, unification of that data the way it was set up. So because of that, it means that typically it was probably organisations that are on the higher end of the SMB market, maybe 300 million to a billion, and then the enterprise companies. I'd say now we're going down to companies that are 10 million, 20 million, 30 million. It is more accessible. From BlueVenn, we cross many verticals, so I couldn't really say there's a specific vertical that looks at CDPs, but certainly for us, a high proportion of our clients are retail, or particularly multi-channel retail, and media publishing, travel, leisure. Those are high, and we some large B2B organisations as well, and insurance and finance. So yeah, I mean it's a broad mix. I think what the CDP has done though is make it more accessible to all organisations of all sizes.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for answering that, Anthony. And I think that's going to bring us to the end of our session now. So I just want to say thank you to the presenters for coming on today's session, and also thank you to the audience for joining us today. We hope you have found the session beneficial. If you do have any further questions for us, then please feel free to contact us on the details you can see on the screen. And I do just want to reiterate, as I said at the beginning, that the session's been recorded. So all registrants will receive that recording within about 48 hours. And you'll also receive the full Customer Data Excellence Report, which has all of our survey results, and we've given you a sneak preview in this session now. So yeah, thank you very much again for joining, and hope you have a lovely day. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, and bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.